Have you ever wondered what price is paid for humanity as survival in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? Meet Kalin Voss, an ordinary man, a devoted husband and father. His life was simple, filled with love and duty, until the black ships arrived. Deemed a psyker, Kalin was torn from his family, his pleas and cries for his children lost to the uncaring void. He wasn't a heretic or a traitor. He was just a man with a latent gift he never knew he had. His fate: to be sacrificed, his very soul burned as fuel for the Astronomican, the psychic beacon that guides ships through the warp. Kalin Voss represents one of the countless trillions whose lives are extinguished, not in glorious battle, but as a tiny anonymous sacrifice to keep the great, grinding wheels of the Imperium turning. A horrifying, yet necessary, price for survival. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the 4OK universe. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we delve into a story that begins not with a bang, but with the endless, deafening grind of industry. A tale that starts in the soot-choked depths of a hive world, a place where humanity is just another resource to be spent. This is the story of Kalin Voss. Imagine a world where the sky is a permanent smear of rust-colored smog, where the sun is a myth whispered by the old. This is the reality for trillions across the Imperium of man, and for Kalin, it is the only life he has ever known. He is a hive worker, a nameless, faceless cog in a machine so vast it defies comprehension. His world is the factory floor, a sprawling metal hellscape of smoke, fire, and the relentless screech of grinding metal. Each day, or what passes for a day, in the perpetual twilight of the Underhive, is a carbon copy of the last. The wail of the work siren rips him from a fitful sleep in his cramped tribune, a tiny metal box stacked among millions of others. The air is thick with the taste of oil and recycled chemicals. There's no sunrise, no birdsong, only the distant, ever-present hum of machinery that vibrates through the very bones of the hive. He pulls on his stained, grimy overalls, the fabric stiff with sweat and industrial residue. Breakfast is a nutrient paste, a gray, tasteless slurry dispensed from a communal vat. It provides the energy to work, and nothing more. Joy, flavor, satisfaction, these are luxuries the Imperium cannot afford to grant its labor force. The journey to his workstation is a descent into chaos. He joins a river of humanity, a torrent of tired bodies shuffling through dimly lit, claustrophobic corridors. The press of the crowd is immense, a single, anonymous mass moving towards its shared fate. The air is filled with the cacophony of coughing, shuffling feet, and the distant, rhythmic clang of the great forges. These people are his neighbors, his co-workers, but there are no real connections. In the hive, you learn to keep your head down, to look out for yourself. Attachments are a weakness, a vulnerability in a system designed to break you. Kalin's station is by the great plasmas. The heat is a physical blow, a shimmering wall that sucks the moisture from your lungs with every breath. He wears protective gear, but it's worn, secondhand, and offers little real defense against the inferno. His job is simple, repetitive, and brutally dangerous. He monitors the flow of molten adamantium, ensuring the pressure gauges stay within the green. One moment of distraction, one flicker of an eye, and the consequence is instant. Fiery oblivion. He's seen it happen. Men vanishing in a flash of white-hot light, their screams swallowed by the roar of the furnace. They are replaced before the shift ends. No one mourns. No one has the energy. His hands are a testament to his labor. They are scarred, calloused, the nails permanently blackened with grime. His body aches with a fatigue so deep it feels like it's settled in his bones. This is survival, but it isn't living. It's a slow, grinding process of being consumed by the very industry he serves. The Imperium demands sacrifice, and Kalin, like billions before him, offers his life one agonizing shift at a time. Dois, Edrim, yes, but his dreams are small, muted things, crushed under the weight of his reality. He might dream of an extra ration of food, a shift without a near-fatal malfunction, or the impossible luxury of seeing a real star. But hope is a dangerous currency in the Underhive. It's a spark that the oppressive gloom is quick to extinguish. He has learned to silence that part of himself, to lock away any aspiration beyond enduring the next cycle. He is no thing, a number in a census, a worker designation, a statistical probability of workplace death. He is Kalin Voss, but that name means nothing to anyone, not even really to himself. He is a tool, and when he breaks, he will be discarded and replaced. In a galaxy teeming with heroes, demigods, and monsters, most are born simply to toil and die. Their lives a brief, forgotten footnote in the grand, terrifying history of the Imperium. Kalin is no different. He never asked for more, never expected it. He never imagined that the gaze of the powerful, the attention of those who sit in gilded halls light years away, would ever fall upon a lowly factory worker like him. He is blissfully, tragically unaware that the gears of fate have already begun to turn. Destiny, in its cruel and merciless wisdom, has a different path for him, a path that leads away from the familiar hell of the factory and towards the burning, terrible light of the Emperor's golden throne. His anonymous life is about to end, and a new, far more frightening chapter is waiting to be written. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the depths of the 41st millennium. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the life of a Hive worker, please be sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories from this universe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Let me know in the comments what you think awaits Kalin Voss. Until next time, stay safe and keep exploring. Hello lore masters, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we delve into a chilling chapter of the Imperium's history, a moment that strikes fear into the heart of every Imperial citizen. The arrival of the Black Ships. Imagine this: you're living your life in the labyrinthine depths of a Hive city, a cog in the vast machine of the Imperium. Life is hard, monotonous, but predictable. Then, one day, the sky darkens. It's not a storm or an eclipse, descending from the void like colossal birds of prey, their hulls swallowing the light, are the Black Ships. They come without warning, their arrival a silent, terrifying omen. For the common citizen, these vessels are not symbols of the Emperor's protection. They are harbingers of doom, the physical manifestation of whispered nightmares. Every child has heard the stories, the hushed tales of psychic harvests, of neighbors who vanished without a trace, of a fate worse than death. These ships are the stuff of legends, and their presence turns those legends into terrifying reality. When the Black Ships anchor in the void above a world like Kalin's, a palpable fear spreads faster than any plague. It's a cold, suffocating dread that seeps through the adamantium walls and filters down into the deepest under. The bustling noise of the city dies down, replaced by an unnerving silence, broken only by the frantic, desperate prayers echoing from Hablot. Families clutch their holy icons, begging the good emperor to be overlooked, to be spared. Parents frantically hide their children, especially those who are ... Those who see things others don't, who hear whispers on the wind. They know who the ships have come for. For a young soul like Kalin, there is no escape. The terror is not just in the sky above, it's now on the streets below. The massive ramps of the Black Ships descend, and from their shadowed interiors emerge two of the most feared arms of the Imperium. First, the representatives of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Their eyes seem to look right through you, searching for the faintest flicker of psychic potential. They are the Hunters, and accompanying them, a presence that is an absence, a void in the warp itself. The Sisters of Silence, clad in ornate golden armor. They move with a grace that is both beautiful and terrifying. They carry no psychers among them. In fact, their very presence is anathema to psychic ability, a null field that causes agony and confusion to any with the gift. 2. The ordinary person. Te hustfele. Wrong. A cold spot in your soul you can't explain. The two factions, Hunter and Null, work in perfect, chilling concert. Together, they sweep through the Hive sectors. Their procession is slow, methodical, and utterly inexorable. They don't need to break down doors. The populace is too cowed to offer resistance. They simply walk the grimy streets, their unblinking gazes scanning the crowds. pointing out individuals with a single, damning gesture. A child clutching a toy, a teenager staring into the distance, an old man muttering to himself. The chosen, those marked for this grim harvest, are given no explanation beyond a few cold, rehearsed words. They are promised a life of sacred service to the Emperor. They are told it is a high honor, a sacrifice that will help safeguard humanity. But the words ring hollow. No one truly knows what this service entails. No one who is taken ever returns to tell the tale. The families left behind can only weep, their loved ones swallowed by the indifferent machinery of the Imperium. The black ships don't ask for volunteers. They don't negotiate. They demand two things: obedience and silence. Resistance is not just futile, it's unthinkable. To stand against them is to stand against the will of the Emperor himself, a heresy of the highest order. So, the people stand by and watch as their own are led away in chains, their futures erased, their identities stripped away. They are now just a number, a resource to be processed. The tithe. The tithe of psychers is the lifeblood of the Imperium. It is a grim necessity that fuels the Astronomican, the psychic beacon that allows for interstellar travel. Without it, the Imperium would collapse, isolated and blind. Some of the strongest psychers are trained to become sanctioned members of the Astra Telepathica, while the weakest, the vast majority, are destined for a far darker fate, to be sacrificed to power the Golden Throne, offering up their very souls to sustain the fading life of the Emperor. This is the brutal reality behind the whispered stories. The sacred service is, for most, a death sentence. As Kalin is identified, marked, and herded towards the waiting ship, the promises of honor are drowned out by the silent screams of the countless souls who have walked this path before. The child is no longer a person. She is now part of the tithe. Her old life is over, and a new, terrifying existence is about to begin within the cold, silent confines of the black ship. A journey into darkness, from which there is likely no return. This grim process repeats itself across countless worlds, a necessary evil that underscores the profound darkness of the 41st millennium. It is a reminder that in the grim darkness of the far future, the survival of the many is often paid for with the souls of the few. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the lore. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please consider hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and ringing the bell so you don't miss our next exploration of this fascinating universe. Let me know in the comments what you find most terrifying about the black ships. The air in Sector Gamunen had a permanent metallic temps, a mix of recycled atmosphere and the ceaseless industry that was the lifeblood of our world. It was a taste I'd known since birth, as familiar as the hum of the maglev trains rattling the Hablock walls. I was Kalin Voss. Not a hero, not a rebel, just a man, a factorum worker, my days measured by the scream of machinery and the chime of the shift end bell. I had a small life, but it was mine. A wife, a Lara, whose smile was the only real light in the perpetual twilight of our city. A son, Jox, whose laughter was a sound more precious than any imperial credit. That day started like any other. The gray light of the lumens flickered on, a poor substitute for a sun we never saw. Ilara was already awake, humming a tune from her youth as she prepared the morning's nutrient paste. Jox was still asleep, a small, warm lump under the thin synth fabric blanket. I remember thinking, in that quiet moment, that I was lucky. In a galaxy of endless war and unimaginable horrors, I had this tiny, fragile piece. The klaxon blared later that morning. It wasn't the shiftya alarm. This was different. A deep, resonant howl that shook the very plasteel beneath our feet. A civic alert. It meant lockdowns. It meant Arbeits patrols. It meant trouble. People scurried from the walkways, the usual bustling crowds vanishing into the labyrinthine corridors of the Hablocks. Alara pulled me inside, her face pale. We barred the door, the sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoing from the street below. They weren't the familiar clank of the local enforcers. This was the sound of authority, the sound of something absolute. Through the grimy viewport, we saw them. Figures clad in obsidian armor, their forms bulky and inhuman. The Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's own guards. though I didn't know their name then. They moved with a chilling, synchronized grace, their halberds held at a perfect, menacing angle. Flanking them were Sisters of Silence, their presence a void in the air, a psychic blankness that made the mind recoil. And behind them floated the Black Ship, a void-faring cathedral of dread, its shadow falling over our district like a shroud. Its purpose was whispered and terrified, tallies told the frightened children. They came for the tithe. Not of goods or materials, the tithe of souls. My heart hammered against my ribs. We were nobodies. We paid our tithes. We prayed to the Emperor. We kept our heads down. They had no business here, in our insignificant corner of the Hive. Then came the banging on our door. Not a knock, but a percussive slam that vibrated through the small apartment. Jock started crying, a terrified wail. Elara clutched him, her eyes wide with a fear I had never seen before. The door didn't break. It simply dissolved. A melted charge, I realized later. It turned the reinforced plasteel into a glowing, molten slag. 2 soldiers clad in the black carapace of the Imperial Guard stepped through the haze. Their faces were grim, hidden behind visors. They were merely the heralds. Behind them stood one of the giants in gold, his plumed helmet nearly scraping the ceiling of our tiny home. His presence filled the room, oppressive and absolute. He didn't speak. He simply raised a gauntlet hand and pointed at me, a cold dread, colder and sharper than any fear I had ever known, pierced through me. It wasn't a mistake. There was a certainty in that gesture that defied all logic, all hope. "No," I heard Elara whisper. A choked, desperate sound. "Please, he's done nothing." The soldiers moved with brutal efficiency. One grabbed my arm, his grip like a steel vise. The other stood guard, his lasgon leveled, not at me, but at my family. A clear, unspoken threat. I was being taken. I didn't understand. I wasn't a psyker. I'd been tested as a child. Like everyone, I wasn't a warrior. My hands were calloused from tools, not weapons. I held no influence, commanded no one. I was Kalin Voss, a cog in the great grinding machine of the Imperium. Cogs are replaceable, but they aren't singled out. Why? I managed to choke out, the word feeling useless, as soon as I said it. What have I done? The custodian finally spoke, his voice a synthesized baritone, devoid of any emotion. "You have been marked as worthy. You will serve the Emperor." The words were a death sentence wrapped in the language of honor. Our neighbors peered from their doorways, their faces a mixture of fear and a chilling, silent relief that it was me, not them. No one spoke up. No one moved to help. To intervene would be to invite the same fate. They just watched as I was dragged from my home. Our local priest, a man whose sermons I had listened to every week, was there in the plaza. He rushed forward, his robes flapping. "A great honor, eh?" proclaimed, his voice loud for all to hear. "This soul has been chosen, a testament to our sector's faith. He goes to serve the Golden Throne." His words were hollow, a desperate attempt to frame this abduction as a blessing. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was just as scared as everyone else. I was pulled through the streets, a prisoner in a parade of my own doom. I saw my whole life laid out in those familiar, grimy corridors. The vendor stall where I'd bought Elara a synthflower on our anniversary. The corner where I'd taught Jocks to tie the laces on his first pair of boots. Every memory was now a ghost, a part of a life that was already over. They forced me onto a ramp leading into the belly of the Black Ship. I twisted, trying for one last look at my home, at my world. I saw Elara. She had run out onto the walkway, holding Jocks. Her face was a mask of pure agony. Our eyes met across the distance, and in that single, shared glance a universe of unsaid goodbyes passed between us. I saw Jocks, his small hand reaching out for me, his cries lost in the noise of the city. Then the ramp closed, plunging me into darkness. The sound of my world was replaced by the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet, weeping despair of others who had been chosen. I was just one of many, torn from our lives, our names and histories erased. The priest, called it service. The custodians called it worthiness. But I knew the truth. It was sacrifice. It was the end of Kalin Voss. The end of everything I had ever been, and everything I had ever loved. The Emperor demands a tithe, and that day, the tithe was me. I was no one, yet I was to be given to the great, uncaring void in his name. And as the ship began to ascend, leaving my world and my family behind forever, the only thing I felt was the crushing, silent scream of a soul being torn in two. Thank you for watching. The universe of the 41st millennium is a vast and often terrifying place. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the life of an ordinary citizen of the Imperium, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories from the grim darkness of the far future. Today, we embark on a journey that few undertake willingly, and from which even fewer return. We're stepping aboard a black ship, those silent, soul-dreading vessels of the Adeptus Astrotelepathica, to witness the chilling reality of the psychotype. Our guide is a young soul named Kalin, whose story begins not with hope, but with the cold, unforgiving clasp of iron shackles. The moment Kalin was herded onto the black ship, any semblance of a normal life was extinguished, like a candle flame in a vacuum. This was no vessel of passage, no transport for colonists seeking new worlds. The black ship was a tomb in motion. Its interior was a labyrinth of cold, dark cells, a honeycomb of despair carved from obsidian-like metal. Kalin was shoved into one such cell, the grate slamming shut with a sound of absolute finality. He was not alone. Thousands of others, men, women, and even children, were packed into this metallic purgatory. Their faces were a mosaic of confusion, terror, and a dawning, horrifying realization. Shackles bound their wrists and ankles, heavy and cold, a constant reminder of their status. They were no longer citizens of the Imperium. They were cargo. Property. A resource to be expended. Patrolling the echoing corridors were the wardens, figures of dread and silence. These were the Sisters of Silence, their psychic Nalora, a suffocating blanket that snuffed out the flickering embers of Kalin's nascent powers, leaving a hollow ache in his soul. They moved with an unnerving grace, their ornate armor a stark contrast to the brutal simplicity of the ship's design. They never spoke. Their gazes, when they fell upon the prisoners, were devoid of pity, of malice, of anything remotely human. They were simply watchers, guardians of a grim and terrible purpose. No words of comfort were offered. No explanations were given for their abduction. The journey stretched into an abyss of time. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, measured only by the meager, tasteless nutrient paste shoved through a slot in the cell door. The stars, the familiar constellations that had once offered a sense of place and wonder, were hidden from view. There were no portholes, no observation decks, only the oppressive, recycled air and the perpetual twilight of the ship's interior. The only sounds were the hum of the ship's ancient engines, the distant, rhythmic tramp of the warden's boots, and the whispers. The whispers. In the crushing darkness, hope, however frail and misguided, tried to take root. Whispers echoed through the grates, passed from one cell to the next in hushed, desperate tones. "They're taking us to train for the Imperial Guard," one voice would insist, a young man from a Hive world who saw martial service as an honor. "The Golden Throne. They need workers for the palace itself," another would theorize, imagining a life of servitude in the heart of the Imperium as a fate better than this unknown dread. They spun tales of purpose, of service to the Emperor, clinging to the propaganda they had been fed their entire lives. The tithe was an honor, they had been told, a noble sacrifice for the good of mankind. Kalin listened to these whispers, but found no comfort in them. He was a thinker, a watcher. He saw the cracks in their desperate logic. If they were volunteers, why the shackles? If this was an honor, why the silence, the fear, the utter lack of dignity? He watched the faces of the Sisters of Silence, searching for a flicker of something that would support the hopeful rumors. He found nothing but a cold, dutiful void. His own psychic senses, though muted by the Null Maiden's presence, screamed a silent warning that resonated deep in his bones. This was not a path of glory. Then, the disappearances began. At irregular intervals, the rhythmic clang of the cell doors would break the monotony. A squad of wardens would march to a specific cell. The door would grind open, and a prisoner would be dragged out. There were no pleas, no struggles that lasted more than a few seconds, just a muffled cry, a brief scuffle, and then silence as the wardens marched away, their prisoner in tow. They never returned. The first time it happened near Kalin's cell. A woman who had been weaving tales of becoming a sanctioned astropath was taken. The cell next to his fell silent. The whispers in that section of the ship died down, replaced by a tense, listening quiet. Fear, which had been a constant, low hum in the background, now began to grow, to coalesce. It became a palpable entity, a living thing that slithered through the darkness, coiling in the pit of every stomach. With each person taken, the fear grew heavier, more suffocating than the Nalora of the sisters. Kalin began to keep a mental tally. He noted who was taken. The ones who cried out in terror. The ones who seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. The ones who spoke of hearing voices or seeing things that weren't there. A pattern began to emerge. A horrifying, undeniable pattern. They weren't taking the strong or the compliant. They were taking the psychers, the ones whose powers were too volatile, too raw. The hopeful whispers about the Imperial Guard and palace labor faded away completely, replaced by a new, more terrible theory. It was a truth so monstrous that no one dared speak it aloud, yet it hung in the air, shared in the terrified glances between prisoners. They were not recruits. They were not volunteers. Te were fuel. They were sacrifices, already chosen and condemned. Kalin looked at the faces around him, the hollowed-out eyes, the gaunt cheeks. He saw himself reflected in their despair. The tithe was not an honor. It was a culling, a harvest of souls. The Imperium wasn't seeking to train them. It was seeking to consume them. The journey was long, but its end was no longer a mystery. Their destination was Terra, the throne world, the most sacred place in the galaxy. But they were not going as pilgrims. They were going as offerings. Their destination was Terra, and for nearly all of them, their destination was death. Kalin gripped the cold bars of his cell, the metal biting into his skin. The fear was no longer just a feeling, it was a certainty. And as the ship plunged on through the silent void, he could only wait for the day the wardens would stop at his door. This is the grim reality that underpins the very survival of the Imperium. A constant, brutal sacrifice required to keep the darkness at bay. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The darkness inside the ship was absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket that pressed in from all sides. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was the absence of everything. We were packed together, a mass of humanity stripped of names and faces, reduced to the sound of our own breathing and the phantom warmth of the person next to us. It had been weeks, months. Time had lost all meaning in this steel womb, hurtling through the void. In this oppressive silence, whispers began to bloom like fungal growths in the damp. At first, they were hesitant, fearful. But fear is a powerful glue. And soon, it bound us together. So did a desperate, gnawing curiosity. They said we were chosen, a voice rasped near me, thin and reedy. For a great purpose, to serve the God Emperor on a world of light. A bitter, humorless chuckle answered from another direction. Chosen. We're tithed. Like grain from a harvest field. Don't fool yourself. I listened. My own thoughts, a tangled mess. My name is Kalin. Or it was. Here, I was just another body in the dark. I tried to hold on to the official story, the one the adepts in their crimson robes had preached back on my homeworld. A pilgrimage, a sacred duty, a chance to serve the Imperium in its glorious heart. We were the lucky ones, the faithful, selected from millions. But the longer we spent in this cramped, stinking hold, the more that story felt like a threadbare lie. One night, or what passed for it, a man pressed close to me. His breath was hot and smelled of nutrient paste and decay. My brother, he whispered, his voice trembling. He was a voidfarer. Traveled the star lanes. He told me things. Things you're not supposed to know. What things? I asked, my own voice a dry crackle. He hesitated, the weight of his heresy heavy in the air between us. He spoke of Terra, of the Golden Throne. He said there's a light that guides all ships, a psychic beacon. The Astronomican, he called it. The name meant nothing to me. It sounded grand, imperial. A beacon. That sounds like the Emperor's grace. No, the man hissed, grabbing my arm with a surprising strength. His fingers were bony, desperate. You don't understand. A light that powerful. It needs full and a lot. Oh, full, my brother said. He said it burns souls. Thousands a day, to keep the light shining. I pulled my arm away, a cold dread washing over me that had nothing to do with the ship's chill. That's madness. Heresy. The Emperor protects. He doesn't consume. Doesn't he? The man's voice was a ghost of a laugh. What do you think's powers this Imperium, friend? Faith. Steel. No. It's us. It's always been us. His words were poison, but they found fertile ground in the barren soil of my hope. A psychic beacon, powered by souls. It was an insane, blasphemous idea. I rejected it. I had to. My faith was the only thing I had left. But the seed of doubt had been planted. It began to sprout in the unending darkness, its roots twisting around my heart. The days, if they were days, bled into one another. The nutrient paste we were given became thinner, less frequent. The air grew stale, thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. Fights would break out over a spilled ration or a perceived slight. Brief, clumsy scuffles in the pitch black, ending as quickly as they began, leaving only the sound of pained grunts and ragged breathing. People started to fade. One moment, you'd be leaning against someone's warmth. The next, you'd feel a cold slump as they gave up, their breath sighing out one last time. No one mourned. We didn't have the energy. We just shifted, making a little more room. Hope wasn't slain in a grand battle. Eat died a slow, silent death from 1,000 tiny cuts. It starved in the dark, suffocated in the foul air, and was crushed by the sheer, grinding monotony of our existence. The initial whispers of glory and purpose had long since fallen silent, replaced by a profound, listless despair. We were no longer pilgrims, we were a cargo. It was during this period of silent decay that the man's words returned to me. The Astronomican. A light that burns souls. I started to look at our situation not as a journey, but as a process. The selection on our home world, so formal and righteous. The long, disorienting trip in the belly of this faceless vessel. The slow degradation of our bodies and minds. It all felt systematic, efficient. It felt like they were preparing us for something, not for a life of service, but for an end. One cycle, a new sound broke the monotony, a low, pervasive hum that seemed to vibrate through the very deck plates beneath us. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It felt organic, alive. A collective moan went through the hold. The hum grew, and with it came a pressure inside my skull, a feeling like 1,000 voices screaming just beyond the edge of hearing. People began to cry out, to thrash in the darkness. "What is it?" Someone shrieked. "What's happening?" The man who had told me of the beacon found me again. His voice was eerily calm amidst the rising panic. "We're getting close," he said, his tone flat, resigned. "Can't you feel it?" The choir. The choir. The name sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. The psychic pressure intensified. Images flashed behind my eyes. Not memories, but alien impressions. Vast, cavernous chambers rose upon rows of desiccated figures wired to arcane machinery. A golden, blinding light that seared the mind. It was a torrent of sensation, overwhelming and terrifying. I saw faces contorted in silent, eternal screams, their life force being siphoned away like water from a well. I clutched my head, trying to block it out, but the images were inside me. The hum was inside me. The screaming was inside me. And in that moment of pure, psychic agony, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The truth, so monstrous I had refused to see it, was now laid bare. The adepts had not lied. Not entirely we were chosen. We were on a pilgrimage. We were going to serve the God Emperor at the very heart of the Imperium, but we were not going to be his servants, his scribes, or his soldiers. The ship was a tributary, and we were the water flowing towards a great and thirsty sea. The Imperium wasn't a kingdom we were meant to inhabit. It was a machine. A vast, hungry, ancient machine, and we were its fuel. The realization didn't bring anger or defiance. There was no room left for those. All it brought was a hollow, crystalline clarity. Every sermon, every promise, every prayer of my life had been a lie designed to lead me here, to this exact end. My faith had not been a shield. It had been the shepherd's crook, guiding the sheep to the abattoir. The hum grew into a roar that consumed all other sound. The psychic pressure became unbearable, a physical force that threatened to crack my skull open. I could feel my own consciousness, my sense of self, my memories of a world with a sun and sky, beginning to fray at the edges, being pulled toward that terrible, beautiful, all-consuming light. I am Kalin. I thought the name one last time, a final, futile act of defiance against the inevitable. But the name was already fading, becoming just one more whisper in a choir of 10,000 billion souls. Oh, singing a single, terrible note to keep the darkness at bay. I am not a servant of the Imperium. The truth echoed in the ruin of my mind. I am its fuel, and the fire was about to be lit. Kalin had always dreamed of Terra. He envisioned the throne world, the heart of the Imperium, as a paradise of golden spires reaching into skies of pure azure, a city of radiant light, a testament to the glory of the Emperor himself. He pictured streets paved with marble, where noble citizens walked with purpose, their faces illuminated by the psychic glow of the astronaut. It was the center of everything, the most holy, most perfect place in the entire galaxy, a beacon of hope and order in a universe of chaos. This was the image that had fueled him, that had driven him through the trials and tribulations of his long journey. This was the reward he had sought. The reality, however, was a brutal, soul-crushing betrayal of that dream. As the transport shuttle descended through the smog-choked atmosphere, Kalin's heart sank. There were no golden towers, no radiant light. Below him stretched a vista of ash, dust, and decay. The sky was a perpetual, sickly brown, thick with the exhaust of a billion industries and the pyres of the forgotten. The legendary spires were there, but they were crusted with millennia of grime, their golden facades tarnished and black. They didn't reach for the heavens. They pierced a shroud of pollution, more like jagged teeth than symbols of hope. The air that rushed in as the ramp lowered was not the crisp, sanctified air of his imagination. It was a foul cocktail of chemical temps, recycled oxygen, and the cloying sweetness of incense, desperately trying to mask the stench of sweat, waste, and despair. The moment his boots touched the ground, the sheer, oppressive weight of 10,000 years of history settled upon him. This wasn't a city. It was a planet-sized tomb, a monument not to glory, but to a slow, grinding decline. He and the other chosen, the victors of 100 worlds, were not greeted as heroes. They were shackled. Heavy iron manacles were clasped around their wrists, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning disillusionment in Kalin's soul. They were marched in chains, a silent, shuffling column of humanity, their hopes and dreams turning to dust with every step. The streets were not paved with marble, but with grimy, cracked ferrocrete, slick with unidentifiable fluids. And they were not empty. They were choked with a tide of humanity, a sea of pilgrims, penitents, and the desperate, all clamoring for a glimpse of the sacred, for a miracle that would never come. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow, filled with a fanaticism that bordered on madness. They pressed in on the procession, their ragged clothes a uniform of poverty, their hands outstretched, pleading, grasping. The guards shoved them back with contempt, their power mauls crackling. But the crowd was endless, a relentless wave of faith and misery. The gates they passed through were monuments in themselves. Each one was larger than any city Kalin had ever seen. Vast edifices of adamantium and ruckrete carved with scenes of ancient victories now barely visible beneath layers of grime and soot. Eagles of stone, their wingspans miles wide, looked down with sightless eyes, their forms eroded by acid rain and time. These weren't gateways to paradise. They were the jaws of some colossal beast, swallowing them whole. And then he saw it. The Imperial Palace. It didn't loom. It dominated. It was a mountain range of a building, a god of stone and steel that blotted out the sky. It was so vast, so utterly beyond human scale, that his mind struggled to comprehend it. Its grandeur was not beautiful. It was oppressive. A declaration of power so absolute it rendered the individual meaningless. Kalin felt himself shrink, reduced to an insignificant speck, a single cell in a dying leviathan. The sheer weight of its presence was a physical force, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The further they marched into its depths, the less of the polluted sky they saw. They left the teeming streets behind, entering courtyards the size of kingdoms, where the only sound was the rhythmic tramp of their own feet and the clinking of their chains. Sunlight, already a pale imitation of itself, vanished entirely. They were swallowed by the palace's shadow, descending into its cavernous interior. The air grew colder, heavier. They moved through halls that could have contained entire armies, their ceilings lost in the gloom far above. They descended deeper, ever deeper, into the bowels of the throne world. The architecture shifted from grandiose to funereal. They walked through cathedrals built not just of stone, but of bone. Reblack arches soared overhead, and walls were decorated with the skulls of saints and martyrs, their empty sockets forming intricate, terrifying mosaics. Statues of primarchs and ancient heroes stood like sentinels in the dark, their faces grim masks of forgotten duty. This wasn't a palace, it was a necropolis, a crypt for an entire species. An unnatural silence began to reign, a quiet so profound it was more deafening than any noise. The air itself seemed to change, growing thin and stale, tasting of dust, rust, and something else ... Something ancient and final. It was the taste of death. Not the sudden, violent death of the battlefield, but the slow, patient, inevitable decay of a corpse. Kalin looked at the faces of his fellow chosen. The hope was gone from their eyes, replaced by the same hollow resignation he felt in his own heart. They had fought. They had bled. They had triumphed. Oh, for this, to be marched in chains into the heart of a tomb, to become another nameless part of the great dying machine. The golden dream of Terra was dead, and in its place was a nightmare of cold stone and eternal twilight. His journey was over, but his damnation had just begun. Thank you so much for joining me on this descent into the heart of the Imperium. If you felt that oppressive atmosphere and want to explore more corners of this dark millennium, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world. Let me know in the comments what you think of this depiction of Holy Terra. Welcome, bike lore masters and Grimdark enthusiasts, to our continuing journey through the dark tapestry of the 41st millennium. Today, we delve deeper, following the footsteps of Kalin as they descend into the very heart of the Imperium Est. Most chilling, we are entering the ritual halls of silence, a place where the echoes of faith are swallowed by an unnerving void. Picture this. Stone corridors stretching into an oppressive darkness, the air thick and cold, not with the chill of a crypt, but with an active, pressing emptiness. Kalin walks, and with each step, the grandeur of the Imperium peels away to reveal something far more sinister beneath. Lining these immense halls are not just statues of long-dead heroes and saints, but rows upon rows of skulls, thousands of them, their empty sockets staring out into the gloom, a silent testament to the countless souls who have passed this way before. It's a macabre gallery, a library of the dead. The silence here is not peaceful. It's a living entity, suffocating and heavy. It presses in on you, muffling not just sound, but thought itself. It's a silence that screams, a void that consumes. Kalin feels it, a cold dread coiling in their gut. This is not a place of reverence. It is a place of processing. And who are the wardens of this crushing silence? Marching in perfect, unnerving synchrony beside Kalin are the Sisters of Silence. Anathema, Sikana, the Silent Sisterhood, clad in golden armor, their faces obscured by helms. They are the Emperor's ultimate weapon against the warp. They carry their executioner greats' words not as ceremonial pieces, but as tools of their trade, held with a readiness that promises swift. Final judgment. They are paragons of humanity, yet utterly devoid of a psychic presence. They are blanks, null maidens, and their very existence is a psychic wound. To be near a Sister of Silence is to experience a profound and disturbing sensation. For a normal human, it's a feeling of unease, a coldness at the edge of your perception. But for anyone with even a latent psychic spark, it is agony. Their aura is a zone of pure psychic nullity, an emptiness that actively scours away thought, emotion, and the very essence of a soul. It's like staring into an abyss that stares back, not with malice, but with absolute, indifferent nothingness. Kalin feels this psychic friction, this grating on the mind, a constant, abrasive pressure that makes it hard to form a coherent thought. It's a spiritual and mental sandpaper, smoothing away the self. As they proceed, the silence is punctuated by a new sound, one that offers no comfort. From shadowed alcoves and high balconies, the chanting of priests begins. But this is not the passionate, fervent prayer of the faithful. Their voices are hollow, detached, and mechanical, like a recording played on a loop for centuries. They recite litanies of duty, sacrifice, and absolution. But the words are devoid of all meaning, stripped of their power by the suffocating aura of the sisters. The chants are just noise, a rhythmic drone that adds to the disorientation. Another layer in this carefully constructed sensory deprivation chamber. The architecture itself seems designed to intimidate and disorient. The ceilings are impossibly high, lost in shadow, making one feel small and insignificant. The statues they pass are not just of imperial saints, but of grim, angelic figures with stern, unforgiving faces. Every archway feels like the maw of some great beast, swallowing them whole. Each step Kalin takes feels heavier than the last, a physical manifestation of their descent. This is not a journey towards the light of the god. It feels like a descent into a classical underworld, a journey into Hades, with the Sisters of Silence as their grim, unfeeling ferrymen. A terrifying realization begins to crystallize in Kalin's mind, a thought that cuts through the psychic static and the hollow chanting. They try to shake it off, to cling to the belief that this is an honor, a sacred pilgrimage, but the evidence of their senses is undeniable. The skulls, the silence, the cold efficiency of their guardians, the soulless prayers. It all points to a singular, horrifying conclusion. They are not being honored. They are not being prepared for apotheosis or sainthood. They are being prepared for something else entirely. This entire procession, this solemn, grand ritual, is a lie. The trappings of faith are just that, a gilded cage to keep the livestock calm before the slaughter. Kalin looks at the intricate carvings on the walls, the polished marble floors, the golden filigree on the sisters' armor, and sees it all for what it is. The pristine, sterile environment of an abattoir. These halls are not cathedrals built for worship. They are slaughterhouses, meticulously designed and consecrated for a single, terrible purpose. And what is that purpose? The thought is so monstrous, it almost stops Kalin in their tracks. The Imperium is vast, and it runs on many resources. Manpower, materiel, faith. But its most precious and esoteric resource is psychic energy. The Astronomican, the Golden Throne, the psychic choirs of the astropaths, all require a constant, massive influx of psychic power. And where does that power come from? It comes from souls, human souls. Kalin understands now. They are the raw material. The thousands of skulls lining the walls are not relics. They are a tally. Each one represents a soul that has been rendered down, processed, and consumed. This entire grand, silent march is the final stage of a production line. The rituals, the psychic dampening field of the sisters, it's all designed to break down the spirit, to quiet the mind, to prepare the soul for a clean and efficient extraction. They are walking towards a machine that will strip them of their very essence, turning their life, their dreams, their consciousness into a flicker of psychic fuel to power the Imperium for another second, another minute, another day. The sheer, industrial scale of the horror is overwhelming. This isn't the chaotic evil of a demon or the primal hunger of a Xenos beast. This is cold, calculated, bureaucratic necessity. It's the logical endpoint of an empire that values survival above all else, even the souls of its own people. Kalin is not a pilgrim. They are a resource, a battery, and the end of their journey is not a throne of glory, but an altar of sacrifice where their very being will be unmade to keep the great, grinding wheels of the Imperium turning. The silence of the halls is the silence of the lamb before the knife, and the priest's chants are nothing more than the hum of the machinery warming up. The descent is almost complete, and the true purpose of these halls is about to be revealed in all its terrible glory. Thank you so much for joining me on this grim exploration. It's a stark reminder that in the 41st millennium, sacrifice is a fundamental truth, and the line between saint and fuel is terrifyingly thin. What do you think of this horrifying process? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more content. It really helps us grow and continue to explore the darkest corners of this universe. Or at least, not consume you. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Let's dive right into the heart of the darkness. It always begins with a whisper, doesn't it? A thought so quiet you can barely hear it over the beat of your own heart. But this whisper, it wasn't born in the mind. It came from the throat of another, a sound that sliced through the suffocating silence of our descent. It was a crack in the dam, a single, trembling word that soon became a scream. One of the captives, a man whose name I never knew, finally broke. His eyes, wide with a terror that was all too familiar, stared into the abyss below us. And then he cried out, his voice raw and ragged, giving voice to the dread that had been coiling in all our stomachs. We are sacrifices, the Emperor. He feeds upon us. The words hung in the air for a single, horrifying second. Then, chaos erupted. It was like a switch had been flipped. The fragile veneer of hope that some had clung to shattered into a million pieces. Panic, pure and undiluted, washed over us in a tidal wave. People started screaming, a chorus of despair that echoed off the cold, unfeeling stone of this endless shaft. Some fell to their knees, their hands clasped together, muttering desperate, frantic prayers to gods who had clearly abandoned this place long ago. Others, driven by a primal madness, turned on our captors. They clawed and bit and fought with the fury of cornered animals, a futile, desperate struggle against the inevitable. Their screams were cut short by the swift, brutal response of the guards, their armored fists silencing the descent with sickening thuds. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, as the man's words echoed in my mind. We are sacrifices. It wasn't a revelation. It was a confirmation. I felt the truth of it deep in my bones, a cold certainty that settled into my marrow. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The strange, solemn ritual of our selection, the unnatural, oppressive silence of our captors, this endless, spiraling descent into the bowels of the earth. It was all a preparation for death. My mind raced, trying to grasp the sheer scale of the horror. This wasn't the noble death of a soldier on the battlefield or the peaceful passing of old age. This was something else, entirely. Something far more sinister. A death that went beyond the mere cessation of breath and heartbeat. A death that consumed the very soul. We weren't just going to be killed. The truth was far worse. We were going to be consumed, dissolved, erased. There would be no bodies to bury, no graves to be mourned over, no memories to be cherished by those we left behind. Our existence would be wiped clean from the slate of the world, as if we had never been born. We would simply cease to be. Our life force siphoned away to fuel whatever monstrous ritual awaited us at the bottom of this pit. The words that had been drilled into us from the beginning, sacred service, echoed in my mind, but now they sounded like a cruel, mocking joke. Service. What service is there in utter annihilation? There is no honor, no purpose, no meaning. There is only the void, the final, absolute nothingness. A chilling realization washed over me. This wasn't about serving the Emperor. It was about feeding him. We weren't soldiers or subjects. We were livestock being led to a slaughter of a kind so profound it defied comprehension. The fear I had felt before was a child's terror of the dark. This new fear was something else. It was the existential dread of a creature staring into the face of its own complete and total erasure. I looked around at the others. Some were still fighting, some were weeping, some were just staring blankly, their minds having already shattered. I saw myself in all of them. The desperate fighter, the weeping child, the broken man. We were all the same, bound together by this shared, unspeakable fate. The descent continued, relentless and uncaring. The air grew colder, heavier, thick with an energy that felt ancient and malevolent. It clung to my skin, seeped into my lungs, a promise of the oblivion to come. The guards stood impassive, their helmets hiding whatever thoughts they might have had. Were they men? Or were they just extensions of the Emperor's will, cogs in this terrible machine of consumption? The man who had screamed was gone, dragged away into the darkness, his final, desperate cries fading into the cacophony of despair. But his words remained. They had planted a seed of terrible truth, and now it was growing, wrapping its thorny vines around my heart. We are sacrifices. We are food. As we descended further, a strange calm began to settle over me. It wasn't peace. It was the quiet resignation of a man who's looked over the edge and seen the bottomless pit waiting for him. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a cold, burning ember of understanding. All Teliers, all the deceptions, all the grand pronouncements of the Emperor's glory were just a curtain, hiding the monstrous truth. There is no sacred service. There is no glorious purpose. There is only the hunger of the Emperor, and we are the feast. The descent continues, and with every foot we travel downward, we are one step closer to being utterly and completely erased. The only question left is not if we will die, but if any part of us, even a memory, will survive the end. And deep down, I already knew the answer. Annihilation awaits us all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dark. It's a bleak chapter, I know, but the story is far from over. If you're captivated by Kalin's fate and want to see what happens next, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Have you ever wondered what it truly costs to keep a galaxy-spanning empire from crumbling into darkness? What unspeakable price is paid every single day just to keep the light of humanity flickering against an endless night? Today, we delve into one of the most terrifying truths of the 41st millennium, a secret hidden in plain sight, a horror that underpins the very existence of the Imperium of man. This is the story of the Emperor's shadow, the Golden Throne, and the silent custodians who guard a galaxy-sized lie. Imagine being told you are special, chosen from billions for a sacred duty. This is the life of a psyker within the Imperium, an individual born with the ability to touch the warp. From the moment your powers manifest, you are hunted, tested, and ultimately collected. You are loaded onto the infamous black ships, vast, silent vessels that traverse the void, their holds filled with psychic potential. For many, like a young man named Kalin Voss, this journey is shrouded in whispers and he, and others like him, are told they are being taken to Holy Terra, the throne world, to serve the Emperor directly. What greater honor could there be? The rumors spread like wildfire through the cramped, cold holds of the ship. Some of the chosen, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and reverence, speak of seeing the Golden Throne itself. They imagine a magnificent hall, the heart of the Imperium, where the master of mankind sits in eternal vigil. They dream of joining the ranks of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, their minds becoming beacons of communication across the stars. Others, more fearful, whisper of the guardians of the Thronda. Adeptus towering figures clad in auramite gold, demigods of war who have stood guard for 10,000 years. They are the Emperor's personal protectors, and their silence is as legendary as their martial prowess. The thought of even standing in their shadow is enough to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Kalin listens to these stories, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He's different. He feels things, sees connections others miss. The oppressive silence of their handlers, the complete lack of information, the way the ship itself seems to absorb all hope. It doesn't feel like a journey towards a glorious new life. It feels like a procession towards a final end. The pieces of a horrifying puzzle begin to click into place in his mind. He thinks of the Astronomican, the psychic beacon that allows starships to navigate the treacherous currents of the warp. They say it is powered by the Emperor's will alone, a constant, blazing star in the immaterial sea. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if a fire that bright requires more fuel? Then there are the black ships themselves. Why the secrecy? Why they fear? If they were merely recruiting for a holy order, why are they treated like cattle being led to slaughter? Kalin's psychic senses pick up on the echoes of despair, the silent screams of countless souls who have made this journey before him. The realization dawns on him, cold and sharp as a surgeon's blade. They are not recruits. They are not being brought to Terra to serve. They are the service. They are not destined for glory, but for consumption. The Golden Throne is not just a seat of power. It is a life support machine of unimaginable complexity and horror. 10 millennia, Ago the Emperor was mortally wounded. To preserve his life and his consciousness, he was interred within this arcane device. But the machine is failing. It requires constant maintenance, constant sacrifice, and the Astronomican, that vital beacon of hope. It is not powered by the Emperor alone. It is fueled by the raw, psychic life force of thousands of psychers, channeled and consumed every single day. This is the faith that awaits Kalin and the others. To be near the Golden Throne is not an honor. It is a death sentence. They will be brought before it, their minds and souls laid bare, and they will be fed, one by one, into the ravenous machinery that keeps the Emperor alive and the galaxy lit. Their existence, their consciousness, their very being will be burned away to provide just a few more moments for the dying Imperium. They are fuel for the fire. Their screams will never be heard, their sacrifice never acknowledged. They are the silent, unremembered martyrs upon whose ashes the Imperium stands. Kalin Voss, once a boy with a strange gift, now understands his destiny. It is not to be a hero, not to be a soldier, not even to be a servant. His destiny, and the destiny of countless others, is to be consumed. The Emperor lives. Yes, but only because thousands die for him each and every day. This is the grim, dark truth at the heart of the 41st millennium. The Imperium survives not on faith or courage alone, but on an endless chain of souls, bound together in a silent, eternal sacrifice. It's a chilling reminder that in this universe, there are no heroes, only degrees of tragedy, and the greatest light is often sustained by the deepest darkness. The Golden Throne is both the symbol of humanity's will to survive and its most monstrous monument to despair. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. If you found this glimpse into the darkness of the 41st millennium fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the worlds of Warhammer. Let me know in the comments what Grimdark secret you want to explore next. We were herded like grux into the waiting chambers, deep in the gut of the Imperial Palace. The air was stale, thick, with the scent of unwashed bodies, incense, and a terror so profound you could almost taste it. There were no windows, no glimpse of the sky we would never see again. Only the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, and the cold, watchful eyes of the priests who patrolled the perimeter. They were silent sentinels, their faces hidden in the cowls of their robes, their presence a constant, suffocating reminder of our fate. Here, time lost all meaning. Was it ours? Days? Weeks. The concept dissolved into an endless, agonizing present. The only markers were the changing of the guard and the meat. Rations of gruel and water shoved through slots in the massive iron doors. We were the chosen. Te, Kajed, Uas, the honored few selected to fuel the Astronomican. To feed the golden throne. What a bitter irony! We were nothing more than psychic cattle, penned and waiting for the slaughter. The chamber was a microcosm of despair, a symphony of breaking minds. In one corner, a chorus of zealots chanted prayers, their voices rising and falling in a desperate, unending litany. They prayed for deliverance, for the Emperor's mercy, for a glorious end. But their eyes held the same hollow fear as everyone else's. Near the center of the vast room, a man screamed. He had been screaming since we arrived, his voice now a raw, broken croak. He shrieked about injustice, about his family, about the life stolen from him, until his throat gave out and he was just a shuddering, weeping mess on the cold stone floor. Others chose a different path into madness. A woman with wild, unkempt hair traced intricate patterns on the floor with a shard of rock, muttering to herself about celestial alignments and cosmic prophecies. She believed she was charting our ascension, not our demise. Some simply gave up. They collapsed into catatonic silence, their bodies still present, but their minds already gone, retreated to a place where the priests and the throne could no longer reach them. They were the lucky ones. Perhaps. I found myself drifting, trying to hold on to the pieces of who I was. Kalin Voss. I had a name. I had a life before this. I was a scribe on a distant agri-world. I remember the sun on my face, the smell of freshly tilled earth, the laughter of my younger sister. These memories became my anchor in the swirling vortex of insanity. I recited them like a mantra, clinging to them as a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood. One cycly, can't call it a die. Sat beside a woman whose name I never learned. She had fine features, the kind that spoke of a privileged upbringing on some spire city. She told me she had dreamed of serving the Emperor, of joining the ranks of the Adeptus Araritis, or the Imperial Guard. She had envisioned a life of honor, of purpose. Now, she just wept. Softly, endlessly. "We are fuel," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. "Just kindling for a dying flame. There is no honor in this, only an ending." Her words hung in the air between us, a stark and brutal truth that no amount of prayer could erase. Every so often, the great iron doors would groan open. The sound would send a wave of fresh panic through the chamber. A priest would step inside, holding a data slate. He would read a name, and the person whose name was called would be escorted out by armed guards. Sometimes they went quietly, resigned. Sometimes they fought, kicking and screaming, their cries echoing down the long corridors until they were silenced. But the result was always the same. No one ever came back. With each name called, the remaining crowd would collectively exhale, a temporary reprieve, before the fear coiled in our stomachs once more. We were a dwindling flock. The spaces between us grew larger. We started to eye each other, a morbid curiosity in our gazes. Who would be next? You. Me. It was a terrifying lottery, and every ticket was a losing one. I started talking to more people, desperate for some connection, some shared humanity, before it was all extinguished. I met a former guardsman, a giant of a man with a tattoo of the Imperial Aquila on his bicep. He'd been identified as a psyker late in life after a battlefield incident. He spoke of valor and duty, but his hands trembled. "I faced orcs. I charged into cultist trenches," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I was never afraid. But this waiting, it's a different kind of war. A war on your soul." Another was a young girl, no older than 16. She clutched a small, carved wooden bird. It was a gift from her father, she explained. She told me about her home, a hablock, teeming with life, noisy and chaotic, but hers. She missed the simple things, the taste of a specific nutrient paste, the view from her window, the feel of her own bed. She wasn't a zealot or a soldier. She was just a child, and she was terrified. Her innocence was the most damning indictment of this whole grim process. The priests offered us no comfort, no explanation. They were instruments of a cold, unfeeling bureaucracy. To them, we were not people. We were a resource, a tithe, a statistic on a data. Our fears, our dreams, our lives, they were irrelevant. All that mattered was our psychic potential, the energy that could be rendered from our souls to power the beacon that held the Imperium together. We were dying so that others, trillions of others, could live, never knowing the cost. I watched as the guardsman was taken. He didn't fight. He stood at Thal, squared his shoulders, and walked out with a dignity that shamed the hooded figures escorting him. I watched as the young girl's name was called. She dropped her wooden bird, and a single, choked sob escaped her lips before she was led away. A small, trembling figure, swallowed by the darkness. I picked up the bird. It felt warm in my hand, a tiny, fragile piece of a life that was about to be snuffed out. The madness was getting closer. I started seeing things in the shadows, flickering faces, whispering mouths. The constant chanting began to sound like my own name, a distorted, mocking echo. The lines between memory and hallucination blurred. Was my sister's laughter real, or just a phantom in my decaying mind? The woman who dreamed of honor was gone now, too. Her space was empty, a void that mirrored the growing emptiness inside me. I held on to the wooden bird. It was my last connection to something real, something pure in this hellish antechamber. I was no longer Kalin Voss, the scribe. I was a number, a unit of potential energy. But as long as I held this bird, a small part of that girl, of that guardsman, of the woman who wept for her lost honor, was still here with me. We were the damned, the sacrificed, the silent, screaming souls at the heart of the Imperium. And now, the doors are groaning open again. The priest is stepping inside, his data slate glowing in the gloom. A new name will be called. Maybe this time, it will be mine. I'm not sure if I'm afraid anymore. There's a strange sense of calm settling over me. The waiting is the worst part. The ending, at least, is a certainty. An end to the fear, an end to the madness, an end to the waiting chambers of the damned. My name. He's calling my name. It's time. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark corners of the 41st millennium. The stories of the Imperium are vast and often grim, but they are compelling. That night, Kalin dreams. It's not a dream of golden thrones or celestial choirs, not the grand, sanctified visions the priests promised would bless the faithful. No, this dream is small and grimy and achingly real. He dreams of home, not the gilded cage of the Imperial Palace, but the true home he left behind a lifetime ago. He sees the towering, soot-stained smokestacks of Hive Primus on his homeworld, great metal spires clawing at a sky perpetually choked with gray industrial haze. To an outsider, it would be a vision of hell. To Kalin, it is a symphony of belonging. The distant, rhythmic clang of the forges is a lullaby. The acidic temps in the air is the scent of his childhood. He sees his family, his father, hands permanently stained with grease and oil, but his smile, oh, his smile was the brightest thing in their cramped habit. He can almost feel the calloused warmth of his father's hand ruffling his hair. His mother, her face lined with worry, but her eyes shining with fierce love, is ladling out a thin, nutrient-paced stew. It was never much, but she made it feel like a feast. He sees his younger sister, Elara, her pigtails bouncing as she chases a rat-sized synth vermin through the corridor, her laughter echoing off the metallic walls. A pure, crystalline sound in a world of rust and decay. They are all there, gathered around a flickering lumen globe, sharing stories, their faces painted in shifting light and shadow. The tiny comforts of a life now gone forever. A chipped mug filled with recaf. The worn-out blanket they all shared on cold nights. The simple, profound joy of being together, of being known, of being loved. He knows, even in the depths of the dream, that this is a gift A final, cruel, beautiful gift. This is the last time he will remember them. The last time the name Kalin Voss will be tied to these faces, to this place. Tomorrow, these precious images will be shattered, the threads connecting him to his past severed by a hunger beyond mortal comprehension. This dream is not a memory being revisited. It is a farewell. He tries to hold on to it, to burn every detail into his soul, but it's like trying to cup water in his hands. The faces begin to blur. The laughter fades into a distant echo, and the warmth recedes, replaced by a biting, familiar cold. Kalin's eyes snap open. The dream evaporates, leaving only the oppressive reality of the chamber. The walls, carved with terrifying, intricate patterns of imperial iconography, seem to breathe. They press inward, a slow, inexorable constriction, as if the very stone of the palace is eager to crush what little remains of him. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of sanctified oils, ozone, and something else. A faint, cloying sweetness that hints at the immense psychic power thrumming just beyond the veil. He is one of many, a single drop in an ocean of sacrifice. Around him, in the dim, cold light, others stir. He hears their whispers, thin and reedy, a chorus of final, desperate pleas. Emperor, guide my soul. For the golden throne, for Terra, let my sacrifice be worthy. They cling to their faith, to the litanies and prayers beaten into them since birth. They see this as a glorious martyrdom, an ascension. They believe they are giving their lives for the salvation of humanity, their souls to become a part of the Emperor's divine light. Terra knows at them. He can feel it in the tremors that run through their huddled forms. But their faith is a shield, however flimsy, against the abyss. It is a story they tell themselves to make the end bearable. Kalin does not pray. He can't. The words feel like ash in his mouth. How can he pray to the very thing that is about to unmake him? The scales have fallen from his eyes. Over the weeks of purification, fasting, and psycho-indoctrination, he has seen the truth that lurks behind the golden mask of the Imperial Creed. He has felt the raw, psychic pressure of the being on the throne not as a benevolent father, but as a ravenous, unending void. The Emperor does not save them. The Emperor Asterisk uses Asterisk them. They are not martyrs, Teare, Phil. They are psychic kindling, stockpiled to be thrown into a cosmic furnace. Their lives, their minds, their very souls, nothing more than a momentary flicker to sustain a dying god. He looks at the face of the man huddled next to him. A young acolyte from a shrine world, his eyes squeezed shut, lips moving in a frantic, silent prayer. The man's faith is a beautiful, fragile thing. Kalin almost envies him. It must be easier to walk into the fire believing you are becoming one with the sun, rather than knowing you are simply being burned. But Kalin's own faith has been scoured away, leaving behind only a cold, hard clarity. He sees the great grinding machinery of the Imperium for what it is, a system that demands absolute sacrifice, not for a greater good, but for its own brutal survival. They're all cogs in that machine, and tomorrow they will be ground to dust. Tomorrow. The word hangs in the air, a death sentence and a finality all in one. Tomorrow, he will be led from this chamber. He will walk the final path to the Sanctum Imperium. He will stand before the golden throne, and he will be undone. His name, Kalin Voss, will be the first thing to go. It will be stripped from him, a meaningless label no longer required. Then, his memories, his father's smile, his mother's embrace, Alara's laughter, the taste of recap, the grime of his home, Hive, will be scattered like dust in a gale. They will be broken down, sifted, and consumed. Finally, his soul, the very essence of his being, the consciousness that is him, will be dissolved. It will be drawn into the maelstrom of the Emperor's psychic mind, a single drop of water falling into a raging ocean, losing all form and identity in an instant. There will be no afterlife, no joining a celestial choir. There will only be nothing. Oblivion. This night, this cold, dark stretch of hours, is all he has left. It is his final moment of self. He is not yet a sacrifice. He is not yet fuel. He is still Kalin Voss. He closes his eyes again, not to sleep, but to remember. He pushes back against the psychic pressure, against the encroaching dread, and focuses. He forces himself to recall the face of his sister, tracing the lines of her mischievous grin in his mind. He summons the sound of his father's voice, a low, comforting rumble. He remembers the feeling of his mother's hand on his forehead when he was sick. These are not just memories. They are acts of defiance. In a universe that demands he be nothing, he chooses, for these last few hours, to be asterisk. Someone asterisk. The others can have their prayers. They can have their hopes of a glorious end. Kalin Voss will have this. He will have the memory of a set-stained hive, of a loving family, of a life that was his. Before the Emperor's hunger takes everything, he will hold on to the last vestiges of his humanity. He will face the dawn not as a saint or a martyr, but as himself. For this one, final night, in the heart of the machine that will destroy him, Kalin Voss is defiantly, heartbreakingly, alive. And in the silent darkness of the chamber, that is the only prayer that matters. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. The fate of Kalin Voss is a stark reminder of the sacrifices that fuel the Imperium. If you are moved by this story and want to explore more of the hidden, human costs of this universe, please hit that like button. The procession began in silence, a stark contrast to the cacophony of fear that screamed within my own skull. The great metal doors, thick enough to withstand a siege, groaned open with a finality that echoed in my soul. A name was called, a hollow sound, in the vast chamber. Kalin. It was my name, yet it felt like a stranger's. Heavy, cold iron links were clasped around my wrists, my ankles, my neck, chaining me to the others, in a long, shuffling line of the damned. We were one now, a single organism of despair. Our individual hopes and fears swallowed by a collective dread. We marched. There were no whips, no shouted commands, only the solemn, rhythmic clanking of our chains against the stone floor, a funeral dirge for souls already lost. We moved through corridors that felt impossibly ancient, carved from the very bones of the planet. The walls were a testament to millennia of faith and fanaticism. Holy symbols of the Imperium, eagles with two heads and skulls wreathed in laurels, were etched into every surface, their stark geometry a constant reminder of the power we were about to serve. Interspersed between them were niches, thousands upon thousands of them, each holding a human skull. They were the silent audience to our final journey, their empty sockets seeming to follow our every step. Were they predecessors, martyrs, or simply warnings? It didn't matter. They were the past, and we were the fleeting present, marching toward the same inevitable future. The air was thick with the scent of cold stone, ancient dust, and the cloying sweetness of burning incense that failed to mask the underlying odor of decay and sorrow. At the head of our miserable column walked the priests, their crimson robes a splash of violent color against the gray gloom. They were ancient men, their faces masks of wrinkled piety, their eyes holding a fervent light that bordered on madness. They chanted, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic cadence. The hymns were in High Gothic, a language older than most star systems, and the words spoke of sacrifice, of duty, of the glorious honor of giving one's life for the Emperor. But the melody was mournful, a lament for the souls they were leading to oblivion. Their sanctimonious pronouncements of glory felt like a cruel joke, a thin veneer of holiness painted over an act of brutal, soul-crushing consumption. Their faith was a shield, protecting them from the horror of what they were doing, a luxury we, the condemned, were not afforded. Flanking our procession, moving with a grace that was both beautiful and terrifying, were the Sisters of Silence. Clad in ornate golden armor, their plumed helms hiding featureless faceplates, they were paragons of martial perfection. But it wasn't their weapons or their skill that struck fear into our hearts. It was the aura they projected, a psychic void, a null field that smothered the very essence of the soul. Aste passed, my thoughts stuttered and died. The level telepathic hum of the thousands of minds around me vanished, replaced by an unnerving, absolute quiet. It was like being plunged into the deepest, coldest ocean. The fear that had been a raging fire in my mind was reduced to a dull, aching ember. I couldn't even properly form a prayer or a curse. My very consciousness felt frayed, thinned out, as if a vital part of me was being erased. The ache in my head was excruciating, a physical manifestation of my soul recoiling from their They were walking voids, guardians against the psychic horrors of the galaxy, and to us, they were the final wardens, ensuring our minds were placid and empty as we approached the altar. The procession wound deeper, ever deeper into the heart of the Imperial Palace. We passed by tech adepts of the Mechanicus, their red robes and bionic limbs a stark contrast to the ecclesiarchy's finery. They moved with purpose, tending to conduits and power lines that pulsed with barely contained energy. Their faces were hidden behind metal masks, their voices a distorted buzz of binary cant. They paid us no mind, treating us as nothing more than biological components, fuel to be loaded into the great machine. To them, we were not men and women with lives and dreams. We were simply biomass, a resource to be expended. Their cold, mechanical indifference was somehow more chilling than the priest's zealous fervor. They were the engineers of this soul engine, the stokers of the eternal flame, and their soulless efficiency was terrifying. The air grew warmer, humming with a power that made the fillings in my teeth vibrate. The dull gray stone gave way to polished obsidian and gleaming gold. Ahead, a light began to grow, a brilliant, blinding effulgence that cast our long, distorted shadows behind us. And then I saw them. Two figures, standing like golden statues, flanking a set of doors so immense they seemed to belong to a god's own citadel. They were custodians, the Emperor's personal guard. Their automite armor was a work of art, shining with an inner light, every surface covered in intricate They held guardian spears with a casual ease that belied the weapon's immense weight. They were giants, transhuman demigods, and their very presence radiated an aura of absolute authority and deadly purpose. Their gaze, from beneath helmets that evoked the heroes of ancient mythology, swept over us. There was no pity in their eyes, no malice, only a profound, weary duty. They were the final guardians, the gatekeepers to the sanctum sanctorum. It was in that moment, seeing those golden doors, feeling the suffocating presence of the Silent Sisters, and the unimaginable power radiating from beyond the gate, that the priest's lies burned away to reveal the horrifying truth. The dread that had been a cold knot in my stomach bloomed into a full-blown, mind-shattering certainty. This wasn't a path to glory. There was no honor in this sacrifice. The stories they told us, of becoming one with the Emperor, of serving as a beacon of hope for humanity, were nothing but a beautiful, terrible lie designed to make the slaughter palatable. We were not chosen for our strength or our piety. We were chosen for the spark of psychic potential we carried, a spark that was about to be used as kindling. The procession halted before the golden doors. The priest's chanting reached a fevered pitch. A tech adept approached a console, and with a series of clicks and binary prayers, the immense gates began to part. A wave of heat and psychic energy washed over us, a tsunami of raw power that buckled my knees. The light from within was not the clean, pure light of a star, but a roaring, incandescent inferno of psychic energy. It was the light of a billion souls screaming in unison, the focused agony and will of a dying god. This was the end, the final destination. The path didn't lead to a metaphorical throne of glory. It led to the golden throne itself. It led to the foot of the master of mankind, not to receive a blessing, but to be consumed. We were sustenance. We were the fuel for the Astronomican's eternal flame, the psychic lighthouse that guided ships through the warp. Our lives, our minds, our very souls were to be shoveled into the furnace to keep the light from dying out for just a few more seconds. The Emperor's hunger was eternal, and we were the feast. As the doors opened fully, revealing the blinding, so searing heart of the machine, the last vestiges of my identity, of Kalin, began to unravel. There was only the fire now, and the long, silent march into its all-consuming embrace. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the grim darkness of the far future. If you found yourself captivated by this tale, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories from this vast and unforgiving universe. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we delve into one of the most chilling and awe-inspiring moments in the lore, as we follow Kalin Voss into the very heart of the Imperium, the Sanctum Imperium. Prepare yourselves, because what he finds there is a truth far more terrifying than any battlefield. Imagine stepping through a portal of pure light, leaving behind the known universe for a space that defies all logic. This is what Kalin experiences. He finds himself in a chamber so vast it feels like a cathedral built by gods. Yet the air is thick and suffocating, heavy with a psychic pressure that threatens to shatter his mind. The very atmosphere hums with a power that is both ancient and agonizingly alive. And there, at the center of this impossible space, it looms. The Golden Throne. It's not just a throne. It's a machine of unimaginable complexity and scale. A web of arcane technology and golden architecture that climbs towards a vaulted, star-strewn ceiling. It pulses with a blinding light. But this light offers no comfort. It's a beacon powered by suffering, a raw, psychic scream that resonates in the soul of anyone who draws near. The sheer force of it almost brings Kalin, a seasoned warrior, to his knees. He expected reverence, perhaps a sense of holy purpose. Instead, he finds an overwhelming aura of need, a cosmic hunger that gnaws at the edges of reality. And then he sees him, the master of mankind. But this is no glorious, radiant God. What Kalin beholds is a corpse that stubbornly refuses to die. The Emperor's withered, broken body is interred within the machine, a grotesque fusion of flesh and gold. Cables and crystalline conduits snake across his skeletal frame, pumping vital fluids and siphoning psychic energy. His face is a mask of eternal torment, eyes hollow yet somehow still seeing across the galaxy. It is a sight that shatters every Imperial myth, every prayer whispered in his name. The Emperor is not a benevolent guardian. He is a prisoner on his own throne, his existence a continuous, silent scream of agony. Around the base of the colossal machine, the scene is one of feverish, desperate worship. Scores of priests, their faces etched with fanatical devotion, kneel on the cold floor. Their voices rise and fall in a ceaseless chant, a litany of prayers that have been repeated for 10,000 years. They are so lost in their rapture that they don't even notice Kalin's arrival. They are simply another component of the great machine, their faith a fuel source for the dying god. The air is thick with a scent of sanctified incense and ozone, a cloying mix of the holy and the technological, moving with silent, almost ghostly purpose among the priests of the tech adepts of Mars. Clad in their crimson robes, their flesh augmented with gleaming bionics, they move like surgeons preparing for a critical operation. They carry strange, arcane instruments. Their mechadendrites worry softly as they make minute adjustments to the throne's systems. They are the keepers of the machine, the only ones who understand the delicate, terrifying balance that keeps the Emperor, and thus the Imperium, from utter collapse. They are preparing for the ritual, the one that sustains this fragile existence. As Kalin watches them work, a horrifying realization dawns upon him. He looks from the chanting priests to the focused adepts, and then back to the tortured figure on the throne. He understands now. The Emperor does not sit upon the Golden Throne as a god of mercy, dispensing salvation to his faithful subjects. He is a god of need, a ravenous, insatiable entity whose survival depends on an endless sacrifice. The Imperium is not a testament to his glory. It is a galactic-scale life support system, built on the bones of 1 trillion souls, all to feed the endless hunger of its caged god. The warmth of the Astronomican, the light that guides humanity through the void, is not a heft. It's a byproduct of this eternal torment. The shield that protects Terra from the horrors of the warp is powered by this unending agony. The Emperor isn't a shepherd protecting his flock. He's a black hole at the center of the galaxy. His gravitational pull so immense that it holds everything together while simultaneously consuming everything it touches. There is no salvation here, in the most sacred place in the galaxy. There is only the desperate, grinding machinery of survival. This is the terrible secret at the heart of the Imperium, a truth so profound and so dreadful that it would shatter the faith of the trillions who worship the god. For Kalin Voss, standing in the shadow of the throne, the galaxy will never look the same. He has seen the true face of his god, and it is a face of infinite pain and infinite hunger. The shadow of the throne stretches not just over this chamber, but across every world, every star, and every human life in the galaxy. And it is a shadow that will never lift. What a chilling and powerful chapter. It really recontextualizes the entire setting of Warhammer 40,000, doesn't it? The grim darkness of the far future has its source right here, in this one room. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. If you enjoyed this exploration of the lore, please hit that like button, and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Hello lore masters and story seekers, and welcome back. Today, we delve into one of the most harrowing chapters in the saga, the breaking of Kalin Voss. Picture this. A vast, cavernous chamber echoing with the low, guttural chants of 1,000 robed figures. In the center, Kalin Voss lies bound to a cold, obsidian slab. But these are no ordinary restraints. Gleaming cables and pulsating psychic conduits are cruelly pierced into his flesh, connecting him to a monstrous, arcane machine. The air crackles with energy, thick with anticipation and dread. The ritual is about to begin. The chanting swells, a monotonous, hypnotic drone that seems to vibrate in your very bones. Then, a signal is given, a wave of a hand, a shifting key tone, and it begins. For Kalin, it's not just pain. It's a tearing, a burning, an agony that transcends the physical. It's a psychic maelstrom, an invisible, unstoppable force that slams into his mind. He feels intangible claws, colder than the void, sink deep into his thoughts, his very consciousness. These are not hooks of metal, but hooks of pure, malevolent will. They latch onto his most memories, his deepest loves, his fiercest loyalties, and then they pull. He screams. It's a raw, primal sound, a soul being ripped apart. But he is not alone. All around him, hundreds of other victims lie bound, cry out in unison. Their individual screams of terror and agony merge, weaving together into a single, deafening psychic storm that batters the walls of the chamber. It's a chorus of the damned, a symphony of dissolution. The air shimmers, reality itself seeming to warp under the sheer pressure of so much suffering. This is the Emperor's power made manifest, an insatiable hunger for the very essence of life. Kalin feels his identity fraying at the edges. He tries to cling to his name, Kalin Voss. He repeats it in his mind, a desperate mantra against the encroaching darkness. But the psychic hooks are relentless. They drag the name from him, like pulling a thread from a tapestry, and the whole picture of who he is begins to unravel. He sees his childhood, the face of his mother, the warmth of the sun on his homeworld doll. It is twisted, corrupted, and then torn away, consumed by the voracious energy of the ritual. His mind is pried open, not like a book to be read, but like a fruit to be devoured. His secrets, his dreams, his fears all, are laid bare and feasted upon by the Emperor's consciousness. He feels the collective presence of the other victims, their minds shattering alongside his. They are no longer individuals, but a shared reservoir of despair. It's an ocean of pain, and he is just one droplet, indistinguishable from the rest, his uniqueness dissolving into the whole. This isn't a quick, merciful death. That would be a kindness. No, this is something far more terrifying. This is unmaking. He is being deconstructed, piece by agonizing piece. Every memory that defined him, every choice that shaped him, every lover gave him meaning, it's all stripped away, converted into raw, undifferentiated psychic energy. He is a building being demolished brick by brick until only the foundation is left, and then even that is ground into dust. The pain becomes a constant, a white-hot noise that drowns out everything else. Thought is impossible. Resistance is a distant memory. He's no longer Kalin Voss, the hero, the soldier, the man. He is a vessel being emptied. The process is meticulous, a horrifyingly precise act of psychic surgery. The goal is not to kill the body, at least not yet. The goal is to erase the soul, to leave behind nothing but a hollow shell filled with pure, unthinking energy, ready to be siphoned off and consumed by the Emperor. As the ritual reaches its crescendo, the psychic storm intensifies. The chamber itself seems to groan under the strain. Kalin feels a final, immense pull. It's the core of him, the very spark of his self. He has no strength left to fight. There is a moment of absolute, terrifying clarity, a glimpse into the abyss of non-existence. He understands, in this final second, that he is not dying. He is becoming fuel. He is becoming nothing. And then, that last spark of understanding is extinguished, consumed by the insatiable, roaring fire of the Emperor's will. What is left on the slab is a body that breathes, a heart that beats, but a mind that is an empty, silent void. The man known as Kalin Voss is gone, his essence scattered and devoured. All that remains is raw power, a battery of life force waiting to be plugged into a galactic engine of tyranny. The ritual is complete. The self has been broken, an absolutely chilling and devastating moment in the lore. The sheer horror of this process is what makes the Emperor such a terrifying antagonist. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the darkness. If you found this exploration compelling, please hit that like button and consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the lore. In the howling vortex of psychic agony, as his very essence was torn from his flesh, Kalin Voss became aware of something else, something beyond his own shattering consciousness. Voices. Not one, not a dozen, but thousands upon thousands, a cacophony of suffering that echoed in the non-space of his dissolving mind. They were the screams of those who had come before him, a ghostly chorus trapped within the very light he was being fed to. This was the great and terrible secret of the Astronomican, the beacon that guided humanity across the treacherous void. It wasn't just a psychic lighthouse, fueled by sacrifice. It was a prison. Every soul fed into its ravenous heart was not consumed, not granted the peace of oblivion. They were preserved. Their consciousness, their pain, their terror, all were woven into the fabric of the Astronomican's light, becoming an eternal, shrieking choir. He could feel them, taste their despair. He heard the desperate wails of a young woman from a forgotten Hive world, promised she was serving the God Emperor, now only begging for an end that would never come. He felt the maddened ramblings of a seasoned astropath whose mind had snapped eons ago. His thoughts, now just a looping spiral of nonsense and forgotten names. He sensed the stoic, silent agony of a warrior psyker from a distant chapter, his discipline shattered, his will eroded by centuries of unending torment, now a quiet pocket of profound hopelessness in the storm. Kalin tried to scream, to add his own voice to the warning, to the plea. But his cry was a single drop of rain falling into a boundless, raging ocean. It was swallowed instantly, lost in the overwhelming tide of anguish that had been building for 10,000 years. The sheer scale of it was incomprehensible, a monument to suffering built on a foundation of souls. He wasn't just dying, he was being integrated. His own memories, his life on the agri-world, the face of his mother, the feeling of sun on his skin, all were being shredded and blended into this collective nightmare. He felt the last vestiges of Kalin Voss being pulled apart, his individuality dissolving like salt in water. The I was becoming we, a we defined only by shared, unending torment. The propaganda, the sermons of the Imperial Creed, had spoken of a noble sacrifice. They had promised that to give one's life to the Emperor was the highest honor, a path to martyrdom, and a place by his side. The truth was a perversion of that promise, a cruel joke played on the most faithful. To serve the Emperor in this way was not to die for him. It was to be eternally devoured by the machinery of his Imperium, to become a conscious, feeling cog in a system of perpetual pain. This was not death. Death was a release, an escape. This was a sentence without end. Kalin Voss was gone, but his awareness remained, a new voice joining the eternal choir of the astro. He was now part of the beacon, part of the light, part of the endless scream that echoed in the dark, a warning to all who could hear it. The Emperor's hunger is absolute, and in his service, There is no peace, only an eternity of suffering. The Astronomican was not a symbol of hope. It was a mass grave where the dead were never allowed to rest. Within the unending tempest of the warp, surrounded by a cacophony of lost souls, Kalin felt Italiano, a presence so vast it dwarfed the chorus of the dead, yet so profoundly broken it seemed on the verge of annihilation. It was a consciousness shattered into a million grieving pieces, a mind of infinite capacity, yet fragmented, each shard glittering with sorrow and a terrible, ancient fire. This was not the gilded god-king lauded by the priests of the ecclesiarchy, not the master of mankind from the propaganda posters. This was the emperor, or what was left of him, a ghost trapped within the machine of the Golden Throne. The voices of the psychers consumed by the Astronomican were a constant, screaming tapestry of terror and pain, but woven through them, like a golden thread through a shroud of black, was a deeper, more resonant agony. Kalin, his own mind a fragile vessel in this psychic ocean, reached out, not with intent, but with an instinct for understanding. He touched the edge of that immense, fractured consciousness, and was immediately overwhelmed. He felt a regret so profound it could drown galaxies, an endless, silent mourning for every single life fed into the ravenous maw of the throne. For millennia the story had been simple. The emperor, in his divine wisdom, accepted the sacrifice of 1,000 souls a day to power the Astronomican, the psychic beacon that allowed humanity to traverse the stars. It was a necessary, noble sacrifice for the greater good of the Imperium. The priests spoke of it as an honor, a final, glorious service to the master of mankind. They painted a picture of a distant, calculating god, a being for whom individual lives were but numbers in a grand, cosmic equation. But this raw, unfiltered truth was infinitely more horrifying. The emperor wasn't distant. He wasn't calculating. He was present for every single death. He felt every soul as it was siphoned, stripped, and consumed. He experienced their final moments, their terror, their confusion, their despair. The cost of every soul wasn't a line on a ledger. It was a fresh wound, inflicted 1,000 times over, every single day, for 10,000 years. The screaming chorus wasn't just background noise. It was his own unending torment, amplified by a factor of trillions. Kalin recoiled from the sheer scale of the suffering. It was a pain that should have obliterated any mind, yet this fragmented entity endured it. And through the sorrow, another feeling bled through, a grim, cold resolve. There was no choice. It was a truth as hard and unforgiving as Adam. Without the Astronomican, the Imperium would collapse. Warp travel would become impossible. Countless worlds, isolated and blind, would fall to Xenos invasion, demonic incursion, or internal strife. Humanity, scattered and leaderless, would be extinguished. The galactic darkness would swallow them whole. The paradox was a blade with two edges, both impossibly sharp. To save humanity, he had to consume it. The Emperor was both savior and executioner, the shepherd and the wolf, forced to devour his own flock to protect them from the greater predators lurking outside the fold. He was a god chained to a terrible engine of his own design, a father forced to sacrifice his children, not out of malice or indifference, but out of a desperate, horrifying necessity. The Emperor did not ignore their suffering. He was intimately acquainted with it. He shared it, absorbed it, became it. Each flicker of a life snuffed out became another shard of his own shattered soul. He was a god, drowning in a sea of his own making, the tears of his children forming the very waves that threatened to pull him under. And yet, the demand remained. The hunger of the throne was insatiable, a constant, gnawing void that had to be filled. The endless hunger was not a flaw in the system. It was asterisk. The system, Kalin finally understood the bleak reality at the heart of the Imperium. It wasn't built on faith, or glory, or even hope. It was built on a foundation of inescapable, shared agony. The Emperor's true nature wasn't divinity. It was sacrifice on a scale that defied mortal comprehension. He was the ultimate martyr, not for a single glorious moment on a cross, but for 10 millennia and counting, a slow, grinding crucifixion renewed with every sunrise on Terra. There was no mercy in this equation. How could there be? To show mercy to the 1,000 souls today would be to condemn billions tomorrow. To stop the endless hunger for a single moment would be to sign the death warrant for the entire human race. It was a calculus of survival so brutal, so absolute, that it left no room for compassion. The survival of the species was the only imperative, the only law that mattered, and it demanded a price that was both unspeakable and unending. This fragment of the Emperor's mind was not a tyrant enjoying his power. It was a prisoner. A prisoner of his own creation, of his own foresight, of his own love for a humanity he could only save by destroying it piece by piece. Kalin felt the ghost of a thought, not in words, but in pure, unadulterated emotion, brush against his own mind. It was a plea, a warning, and a curse, all in one. A silent scream that echoed in the void. Asterisk. There is no other way. Asterisk. The fire Kalin had felt was not the fire of righteous fury, but the cauterizing flame of absolute necessity. It was the fire that burns away the limb to save the body, the fire that scours the earth to prevent a plague. It was a cold, purposeful fire, devoid of passion or hatred, fueled only by the grim logic of extinction. Kalin withdrew his consciousness, his own mind aching with the phantom pains of a billion deaths. He was back in the chaos of the warp, the voices of the lost souls swirling around him. But now, they sounded different. He could hear the Emperor's sorrow intertwined with their screams. The god on the golden throne was not a silent, golden idol. He was the chief mourner at humanity's endless funeral, a king presiding over a kingdom of ashes. A sorrowful shard of a mind that knew the cost of every soul because he paid it himself, over and over again, forever. For in the grim darkness of the far future, for the Imperium, mercy is a luxury that has never, and will never, exist. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. The tragedy of the Emperor is one of the most compelling aspects of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. If you found this exploration as fascinating as I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe for more journeys into the dark corners of the galaxy. Let me know your thoughts on the Emperor's burden in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and praise the Emperor. Have you ever wondered about the true cost of holding back the darkness? In the grim future of the 41st millennium, humanity is besieged on all sides by horrors unimaginable. Its only beacon of hope, the light that guides its starships across the vast, treacherous void, is the It shines from the heart of the Imperium, from holy Terra itself. But this light is not born of technology or faith alone. It is fueled by sacrifice, a continuous, silent, and utterly complete sacrifice. Today, we delve into the final moments of one such soul, a man named Kalin Voss, to understand the price of survival. The journey to the Golden Throne is a one-way trip. For Kalin Voss, it began like so many others, aboard a black ship, plucked from his life. Identified as a psyker, he was deemed too dangerous to live freely, yet too valuable to simply be executed. His fate was sealed the moment the ship's ramp closed, shutting out the sky of his home world for the last time. He was no longer a person, but a resource, a tithe. His destination, the psychic furnace at the heart of mankind's empire. As Kalin was led into the hallowed, terrifying chambers deep beneath the Imperial Palace, the sheer psychic pressure was a physical force. It was a roar that deafened the mind, a weight that crushed the soul. He was just one in a long, shuffling line of thousands, a somber procession marching towards their final purpose. The air itself thrummed with immense power, a symphony of a million screaming souls, all resonating with the mind of the master of mankind. This was the antechamber to oblivion. For a time, Kalin clung to the fragments of who he was. He was Kalin Voss. He remembered the greasy, metallic taste of the factory air on his Hive world, a taste he had once complained about but now desperately savored in his memory. He remembered the rough, calloused hand of his father, clapping him on the shoulder after a long shift. He recalled the warm, sweet smell of his mother's baking, a rare treat in their meager hip. He could almost hear the sound of his younger sister's laughter as they played in the grimy corridors, a pure, bright sound in a world of gray. These were the anchors of his identity, the small, precious moments that made up a life. But the Astronomican is a hungry ocean, and it erodes all that it touches. The psychic pull was relentless, a constant, tearing tide against the shores of his consciousness. The first memory to go was the laughter. It faded from a clear, joyous sound into a faint echo, then silence. He tried to hold on to it, to replay it in his mind, but the sound was gone, replaced by the ever-present psychic scream of the choir. Then the warmth began to fade. The memory of his mother's embrace, the comfort of a shared meal, the simple heat of another human body next to his. These sensations grew distant, like trying to remember a dream from years ago. They became abstract concepts, words without feeling, warmth, family, love. The definitions remained, but the emotional core, the part that made them asterisk, real asterisk, was scoured away by the psychic torrent. He was becoming a dictionary with its pages being ripped out, one by one. He fought. Oh, how he fought. He focused all his waning strength on a single image. His mother's face. He tried to picture her smile, the worry lines around her eyes, the way her hair fell across her forehead. But the image wavered, like a reflection in disturbed water. The harder he tried to grasp it, the more it distorted. Her eyes blurred, her mouth became a featureless line. Soon, he couldn't remember her face at all. He knew he had a mother, but the person she was had been stolen from him. The psychic ocean washed over the memory, and it was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to pierce through the fog, but even that was becoming muted. He tried to remember his own face, staring into a polished piece of metal before he was taken. Was his hair dark? Were his eyes brown? He couldn't be sure. The details slipped away like sand through his fingers. The psychic choir around him wasn't just a sound. It was 1,000 other minds dissolving just as he was, their own memories and identities being torn apart and thrown into the great psychic bonfire. Their agony became his, and his theirs, an inseparable chorus of oblivion. What was his name? The question echoed in the ruin of his mind. He knew he had won. It was important. It was asterisk, him asterisk. Ka? The syllables crumbled before he could form them. He struggled, straining against the immense gravity of the void that was pulling him apart. It was a name. His name. The thought itself was a monumental effort, but the psychic energies of the Astronomican didn't care for names. They didn't care for individuals. They only cared for the raw, psychic potential. The fuel, the concept of home was next. The towering hive spire, the cramped hublock, the perpetual twilight of the underhive. These places had been his entire world. Now, they were just hollow words, the sensory details that made them real, the rumble of machinery, the smell of recycled air, the sight of the endless, sprawling city were gone. He was an astronaut untethered, drifting in an endless, featureless black. The last vestiges of his life, his world, were dissolving into the psychic static. He was no longer Kalin Voss. The man who had lived and breathed, who had loved and feared, was gone, erased. All that remained was a raw nerve of consciousness, a locus of pure sensation. And that sensation was pain, not the physical pain of a wound, but a deeper, more fundamental agony. It was the pain of non-existence, the torment of a soul being unmade. This final, purified suffering was what the Astronomican craved. This was the fuel for the beacon. Around him, countless others suffered the same fate. Men, women, and children. Their lives, their loves, their entire histories rendered down to nothing more than a flicker of psychic energy. In the grand, brutal calculus of the Imperium, their individual existences were meaningless. They were not martyrs who would be remembered in glory. They were not heroes whose deeds would be sung. They were anonymous, forgotten fuel. No ordinary life is remembered in the Imperium, especially not the lives of those fed to its great and terrible machine. The last flicker of what was once a man did not think of his family or his home. It could not. There was nothing left to think with. There was only the final, screaming release, as the last shred of his identity was consumed. He did not die as a man, because a man is a collection of memories, experiences, and relationships. He was stripped of all of that before the end. He ended as nothing, a ghost erased from reality. And across the galaxy, the light of the Astronomican shone brightly, a golden beacon piercing the darkness of the void. Captains on the bridges of mighty warships offered prayers of thanks for its guidance. Navigators used its steady glow to plot safe passage through the warp's madness. Trillions of citizens on a million worlds looked to the sky and saw it as a symbol of the Emperor's unwavering protection. They would never know the name Kalin Voss. They would never know the cost. They would only know the light born from the complete and total annihilation of a soul. Thank you for joining us on this somber journey into the lore of Warhammer 40,000. Story of the Astronomican is a stark reminder of the universe's grim nature. If you found this exploration of the lore compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the dark corners of this fascinating setting. Let us know in the comments what other unseen costs of the Imperium you'd like us to explore next. Until then, may the Emperor protect. For most, death is an ending, a final release from the struggles of life, a passage into silence, or perhaps, for the faithful, a journey to a promised afterlife. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, even this final peace is a luxury few can afford. For Kalin Voss, death was not the end. It was the beginning of an eternity of torment, a damnation beyond anything he could have conceived in his mortal life. His final moments were a cascade of agony, his body broken, his spirit shattered. He expected oblivion. He craved it. What he found was something infinitely worse. Imagine a shore, not of sand, but of screaming souls. Imagine an ocean, not of water, but of pure, psychic energy. A maelstrom of consciousness. This is where Kalin Voss awoke. His awareness, a flickering candle in a hurricane, found itself adrift in this celestial tide. There was no body, no sensation of touch, only a raw, undiluted perception of everything. He was a disembodied thought, a memory clinging to existence amidst a billion others. This was the Astronomican, the beacon of hope for humanity, the psychic lighthouse that guides ships through the treacherous currents of the warp. The light of the Emperor. But from the inside, it was not a light. It was a furnace. On Holy Terra, the priests of the Ministorum preach of the honor of serving the Emperor, even in death. They speak of the blessed souls who give their essence to fuel the golden throne, to sustain the master of mankind, and power the They paint a picture of a holy choir, a chorus of the faithful, their spirits united in a single, glorious purpose. It is a beautiful, comforting lie, a necessary one, perhaps, to hold the crumbling Imperium together, but a lie nonetheless. The reality Kalin now endured was a symphony of damnation. The chorus was not one of glory, but of an ending, unimaginably pain. Around him, he could feel the countless other souls, each one a unique story of suffering. There were psychos, powerful and weak, who had been sacrificed to the throne. Their minds, once capable of bending reality, were now just fuel, their psychic screams adding to the cacophony. There were saints and sinners, heroes and traitors, men, women, and children, all swept up in the same relentless current. Their individual identities were being stripped away, their memories dissolving like salt in water, their very essence consumed by the insatiable hunger of the machine. Kalin fought to hold on. He clung to the memory of his name, Kalin Voss. He replayed the moments of his life, the triumphs and the failures, the loves and the losses. He tried to remember the faces of his comrades, the feel of solid ground beneath his feet, the simple pleasure of a deep breath. These memories were his only anchor in the storm, the last vestiges of the man he once was. But the tide was relentless. With every passing moment, which could have been a second or a century, he felt pieces of himself flaking away, drawn into the greater whole. He could feel the Emperor, not as a benevolent father figure, but as an impossibly vast and ancient consciousness, a gravitational center around which time and all orbited. It was a presence of immense power, but also of immense agony. The Emperor himself was a prisoner on his own throne, a dying god kept alive by the sacrifice of his children. Kalin's suffering was a mere drop in the ocean of the Emperor's own pain, a single note in a symphony of despair that had been playing for 10,000 years. The psychic energy they provided was not a gentle offering. It was violently ripped from them, consumed to sustain a life that should have ended millennia ago. Time ceased to have meaning. There was no day or night, no sleep or waking. There was only the eternal now, a continuous, unbroken experience of being consumed. He felt his consciousness stretch and thin, pulled in 1,000 directions at once. One moment, he was experiencing the final. Terrified thoughts of a psyker from a forgotten Hive world, moments before their soul was fed into the machine. The next, he was reliving the defiant last stand of an Imperial guardsman on a world long lost to chaos. He was becoming a repository for the pain of a galaxy, his individual agony multiplied by the suffering of trillions. The priests on Terra were right about one thing. He was part of something larger than himself. But it wasn't a holy communion. It was a monstrous, soul-crushing engine. He had become a cog in the machine that sustained the Imperium of man. His spirit was the fire that lit the galaxy, the beacon that allowed humanity to continue its brutal, bloody existence. Every ship that made a successful warp jump did so on the back of his torment. Every prayer uttered to the God Emperor was answered, in some small way, by the energy siphoned from his very soul. This was the ultimate irony. In life, he had fought for the Imperium, believing he was protecting humanity. Now, in death, his damnation was the very thing that ensured humanity's survival. His eternal prison was the foundation of the Imperium's continued existence. There was no escape. There was no afterlife. There was no peace, no rest, no oblivion. For Kalin Voss, death was not a release. It was a sentence, a life sentence, to be served for all of eternity, trapped in the endless, screaming chorus of the forever bound to the cold and unforgiving light of the Emperor's throne. His life was over. His service had only just begun, and his suffering would never, ever end. Thank you so much for joining me on this bleak journey into the heart of the Imperium. The fate of Kalin Voss is a chilling reminder of the true cost of survival in the 41st millennium. If you enjoyed this exploration of the lore, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into this dark universe. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Astronomican. Is it a necessary evil, or the Imperium's greatest sin? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. For 10,000 years, the master of mankind has sat immobile upon the golden throne. A silent, decaying sentinel. We are told he's a living god, a beacon of hope, the ultimate protector of humanity. The Imperial Creed paints a picture of a benevolent ruler, watching over his scattered children across the galaxy, his psychic might a shield against the horrors of the warp. But what if that's only part of the story? What if the truth is far, far darker? Today, we peel back the gilded propaganda and stare into the abyss at the heart of the Imperium. We're going to discuss the apotheosis of the Emperor, not through faith and worship, but through millennia of unimaginable sacrifice. To understand the Emperor's current state, we must first understand the Golden Throne. It is not merely a life support system. It is a psychic amplifier of unimaginable power, a nexus of arcane technology and psionic engineering that holds back the tide of chaos from consuming Terra. When the Emperor was interred, mortally wounded by his son Horus, the throne became both his prison and humanity's salvation. But this salvation comes at a terrible, unending price. The throne requires fuel. Not promethium, not plasma, but souls. Every day, 1,000 psychers are brought before the Golden Throne. These are not volunteers. They are tithes from every world in the Imperium. Individuals born with the psychic gift or curse are deemed too weak to be trained, yet too dangerous to be left alone. They are wired into the arcane machinery of the throne. Their minds, their life force, their very essence drained away to sustain the Emperor's fading light and power. The psychic beacon that allows for interstellar travel. They are consumed, their souls screaming into the void, their sacrifice a footnote in the Imperium's bloody ledger. 1,000 souls, every single day, for 10,000 years. Do the math. The number is staggering, almost incomprehensible. Billions upon billions have been fed into this machine, their agony the price of our continued existence. This is where we meet figures like Kalin Voss. He is not a space marine, not an inquisitor, not a hero of the Imperium. He is just one man, one psyker among countless others, whose destiny is to become fuel. Imagine his journey, plucked from his home, identified as a psyker, told he has a sacred duty to perform. He travels on the black ships, the silent, dreaded vessels of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, to the throne world itself, to Holy Terra. He sees the majesty of the Imperial Palace, a continent-spanning fortress of gold and marble. He is brought before the Sanctum Imperialis, a place so holy that to even breathe its air is a privilege few will ever know. The priests tell him of honor, of glory, of the ultimate service to the Emperor and mankind. They anoint him with oils, chant litanies of devotion, and prepare him for his final, sacred duty. But as Kalin is connected to the great machine, as the ethereal tendrils of the throne begin to probe his mind, he sees the truth. The glorious narrative shatters, replaced by a reality of pure, unadulterated horror. He feels it, not just his own life force being siphoned away, but the psychic echoes of every soul that has come before him. A chorus of agony billions strong, an ocean of torment stretching back through millennia. He sees visions, not of a benevolent god-emperor, but of a desperate, dying man locked in an eternal struggle. His own will stretched to the breaking point. He realizes the Emperor isn't just being kept alive by these souls, he is being changed by them. This is the apotheosis, the true ascension. The Emperor is not becoming a god through the prayers of the faithful or the worship of the ecclesiarchy. He is being forged into a divine entity by the sheer, raw power of suffering. Each soul sacrificed is a drop of fuel, but it's also a building block. The collective agony, the psychic death screams of trillions, is being woven into the Emperor's very being. He is absorbing the pain, the fear, the despair of his children to power his endless war. He is a god born not of worship, but of an eternal, galaxy-spanning holocaust. This isn't divine right. It's a desperate, horrific act of cosmic vengeance. Kalin Voss understands this in his final moments. His individual consciousness dissolves. His memories burn away. His hopes and dreams are rendered into raw psychic energy. He is no longer Kalin. He is one more voice in the choir of the damned, a single scream in a symphony of torment that echoes through the warp. His soul is a drop of water in an ocean of anguish, an ocean that holds back a tide of demons. He becomes a part of the Emperor, another tortured thread in the tapestry of this new, terrible godhood. The Imperium survives because of him, and the billions like him. It endures by devouring its own. The priests on Terra will tell a different story. They will record Kalin Voss's name in a great ledger of the honored dead. They will speak of his glorious sacrifice, his ultimate devotion. His family, if they ever learn of his fate, will be told he died serving the Emperor. A martyr for the cause of humanity. His story will become a parable, a lesson in faith and duty for future generations. He will be remembered, if at all, as a hero. But Kalin knows the truth in that final, endless moment of dissolution. He's not a hero. He's not a martyr. A is kindling. He is firewood for a god's eternal, hungry flame. This is the foundational lie of the Imperium. That sacrifice is glorious. The truth is that sacrifice is simply necessary, and it is horrifying. The light of the Astronomican that guides our ships through the dark is not a beacon of hope. It is a lighthouse powered by a bonfire of human souls. This grim reality is the very essence of Warhammer 40,000. It challenges our notions of heroism and sacrifice. Is the survival of the human race worth this price? The Imperium's answer is a resounding, unequivocal yes. There is no other choice. The alternative is extinction at the hands of Xenos, heretics, and the laughing gods of chaos. And so, the black ships continue to sail. The tithes continue to be collected, and the pyre at the heart of the Imperium continues to burn, fueled by the best and brightest, the unknown and the forgotten. The Emperor protects, but the cost of his protection is a debt paid in the currency of souls, a debt that can never be fully repaid. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of the 41st millennium. It's a grim topic, but it's central to what makes this universe so compelling. What are your thoughts on this dark apotheosis? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more lore. Your support helps us continue to explore the shadows of the grimdark future. Until next time, stay safe, and may the Emperor, well, you know. Have you ever wondered what it truly costs to keep humanity alive in the grim darkness of the far future? What is the real price of the Imperium's survival? We're often told tales of heroism, of glorious sacrifice on the battlefield, but the truth, the deepest, most horrifying truth, is far darker. It's a secret hidden behind millennia of ritual and dogma, a truth that would shatter the faith of trillions. Today, we're going to peel back that veil and stare into the abyss at the heart of the Imperium. We're going to talk about the apotheosis of the Emperor and the fuel for that divine fire. For 10,000 years, the master of mankind has sat immobile upon the golden throne. We are taught that he is a silent guardian, a psychic shield protecting us from the horrors of the warp. We are told that the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers sustains his fading life force, a necessary and noble cost. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the golden throne isn't just a life support system? What if it's an engine, a divine fog fueled not just by psychers, but by something far more profound, far more numerous? Let's imagine a man named Kalin Voss. He could be anyone, a decorated guardsman, a pious citizen, a minor noble. He is chosen for a great honor. The ecclesiarchy, the priests of the Imperial Creed, tell him and his family that he has been selected for a sacred duty, a service so profound that his name will be sung in hymns for generations. He is to be one of the chosen, one who will join the Emperor in eternal vigil. He walks through gilded halls, the air thick with incense and the sound of choirs, his heart swelling with pride and devotion. He believes he is about to become a hero, a saint. He's wrong. As Kalin approaches the inner sanctum, the gilded lies begin to peel away. The music fades, replaced by a low, soul-shaking hum. The air grows cold, heavy with a psychic pressure that feels like a mountain pressing down on his soul. This is not a place of serene vigil. It is a place of immense, unimaginable power and agony. He is led to a chamber, not of honor, but of processing. And here, he finally understands. He is not the first. He is not one of a select few. He is one of a billion. Before him, he sees the truth, not just through his eyes, but psychically. A vision slammed into his consciousness by the sheer weight of the place. He sees the endless, silent procession stretching back through time, billions upon billions of souls, who's like him, chosen for this honor. Their final moments were not of peaceful communion with the Emperor, but of sheer, unadulterated terror as their very essence, their consciousness, their soul, was rendered down, stripped away and fed into the ravenous psychic furnace of the Golden Throne. This is the ultimate secret of the Imperium. The Emperor is not merely being sustained. He is being transformed. The continuous, agonizing sacrifice of countless souls over 10 millennia is not just keeping him alive. It's changing him. It's a slow, brutal apotheosis. Every soul, every iota of pain, hope, and despair is another drop of fuel, another fragment of divinity being forged in the heart of the throne. He is becoming a god, not a god born of faith or worship, but a psychic entity born from an ocean of endless, manufactured suffering, a god of sacrifice. Kalin Voss sees it all in a flash. He sees the faces of those who came before him, their silent screams echoing in the warp. He sees the faces of those who will come after him, an unending line of human kindling stretching into the future. He understands that humanity's survival, the shield that holds back the demons and the Xenos, is powered by this monstrous act. The Imperium of man endures not through courage or faith alone, but by systematically, ritually, devouring its own children. It is a civilization feeding on the souls of its people to power the Gdengian that protects it. As the machinery of the Golden Throne takes him, As his own identity begins to dissolve into the psychic maelstrom, Kalin Voss has one final, horrifying moment of clarity. The priests will tell his story. They will call him a hero. They will speak of his glorious sacrifice and his sacred duty. His family will weep with pride, but he knows the truth. He is not a martyr. He is not a saint. Hey? He's few. He is one more anonymous soul consumed by the fire. His agony a single note in the 10,000-year-long symphony of pain that is creating a god and, in doing so, damning humanity to survive. The story of Kalin Voss is a fiction, a thought experiment, but it strikes at the core of the 40K universe's grimdark nature. The Imperium is a regime built on a foundation of such scale and horror that it becomes almost incomprehensible. Is the sacrifice of billions worth the survival of trillions? Is a god born of torment truly a savior? This is the central paradox of the Emperor. He is both humanity's greatest protector and its most voracious predator. His throne is both a shield and a slaughterhouse, and the people of the Imperium live and die under the shadow of a truth they can never be allowed to know. That to keep the wolves from the door, the shepherd must feed them his own flock, one soul at a time. This is the true cost of survival in the 41st millennium. Not just blood and bullets, but the very essence of humanity, sacrificed to a silent, suffering god upon a throne of gold and bone. The flame of hope is kept alive, but it is fueled by the eternal torment of its own people. A chilling thought, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the lore. If you enjoy exploring the darkest corners of science fiction, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this sacrifice justified? We'll see you in the next one.